Welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. We should never stop learning, and in fly fishing especially, we're never done. This week we hear from Packy Trotter, a lifelong fly angler who epitomises the spirit of teaching and learning. STANIC and APGAI qualified, Packy then travelled to the Catskills where he took the FFF certified and FFF masters qualifications, becoming at that time only the second person in their history to pass both exams at the one session. Suffice to say, there's plenty we can learn from Packy when it comes to the art of fly casting and fly fishing.
We went to up into the Catskills, New York State, to a little place called Roscoe, and we went into their backyard to do it, you might say, and it's quite an experience, and it's one that I'll never forget, to be quite honest.
And was it, sorry Packy, was it just that there was nobody in Ireland or the UK was qualified enough for to get these exact qualifications?
No, at the time the only person who that I knew of that had the FFF qualifications was Mr. Paul Arden's, Mr. Sexy Loops. I'm sure you've heard of his thing. Yeah. And he had he was the first person in their history to sit it on the one session and pass it through the certified and masters for school. It later turned out that I was the second. But Robert Gillespie, who was with us that time, he actually went one further. He did the certified, the masters, and the THCI, the two-handed, and he was the first one ever to do the three of them, and he still remains the only one to ever do the three of them at the one sitting.
Oh, yeah.
But I can claim to be the second one in the UK and the first one in Ireland to do it. So.
There you go. Good man, Packy.
And we did it in their backyard.
Yeah. What did that involve, actually, just to give people an idea what you had to do?
Well, basically, there was a lot of study involved. They put a big emphasis on your knowledge. Not necessarily theory, practical knowledge, and your ability to be able to put it across to whoever you're teaching. I would say if you cut it down to percentages, it was probably 65-70% knowledge, and the rest was a practical ability with a rod in your hand.
When you had to let's say study for it, Packy, were you given like a curriculum? Were you given what you had to? Yeah,
we had a syllabus. They supplied it to us. The reason that I found out about it was I actually, I don't know if you, you obviously know the late Peter O'Reilly, and then Liam Duffy, the ex-Garda Sergeant guy from Killishandra. Do you know him?
Yeah.
They very sneakily had did their certified without telling me, So when they told me that they were going, I says I'm going to, and so then we downloaded all the relevant information with regard to what was required to sit the exam, and it was pretty comprehensive, and I mean, there's not too many people that you're going to be guiding in Ireland that wants to know about fishing off the Florida Keys for whatever species, But that kind of a thing at the time was contained within the syllabus, and what flies you might use or lures you might use, and obviously there's going to be a difference in the rods and the lines that you're going to be using. So we were expected to know all that, as well as be able to to teach the cast that would be involved. Say if you're going fishing for bonefish or whatever,
And so, for example, with the questions you'd be answered when you say, like, on the theory, would it be something like you're at a river, there's a downstream wind blowing, and there's a fish rising, but he doesn't seem to be breaking the surface? Was it something like that, or was it more advanced, or was that? What was it like?
Well, they did everything, from basically explain how to cast to a rising fish,
right?
To looking at a certain rise and saying, now, what do you think that particular fish is taking because of the rise form? We were asked things like that. We were asked also. I brought them on to fishing loch style, which I know very little about, I might add, because I'm mainly a hill loch and riverman. But I got them talking about bringing the fly onto the dibble. And they were amazed at this technique, and I spent 15 minutes talking about that.
Good man, Packy.
So but fishing with a team of flies, and the length of the leaders, and when you're fishing, with certain different flies in different positions, to get to induce a take and things like that. But basically, anything they could think of, they asked you. I mean, one of the things that came straight out to me was, what does the term modulus mean to you?
Right.
And luckily enough, I knew what it was. But
and you knew how to answer it. More importantly,
I
what does the term modulus mean to you?
Haven't a clue now. I forgot. It's basically a system of measuring a material's resistance to flexing or bending.
Right.
So that's basically what it is.
You see, I really wanted to find out, because I didn't know it. I wanted to find out.
I think you knew it. I remember when I did my the first qualification, and it was the STANIC exam. I can remember I was chatting to one of the examiners, and whenever we'd finished the exam, he came to me and he says, I was impressed with the way that you didn't invite questions by the answers that you give. And an old guy told me that one time. He says, if ever you're being examined, he says, answer the question without inviting either a rebuttal or an add to that particular question. And so never invite a question with your answer. That's the advice I'd give to people doing anything like that.
Packy, you should be going into politics.
No, as my father once says, there's enough idiots running around the country without you getting involved with them. So I kept away from the politics. Yeah.
So the first qualification then you went for was the STANIC.
And just on that, sorry, Tom, and I noticed from your notes, Packy, you said that you still regard that qualification as the most rewarding and the most relevant.
Yes. The STANIC exam was held at Graffham Educational Centre at Graffham in Cambridgeshire. And I was really lucky in that my brother at the time, he's sadly not with us anymore, but he lived about 3 or 4 miles for it, and he was an honorary warden on Graffham, as a matter of fact. I went there, and it was very, very well organised. Very well organised, and everything was, just to, right, this is going to happen at 12:30. At 1:10, this is going to happen, and that's the way it went. And everybody that the people on the delivering the course, every one of them were on top of what they were doing. They were well informed. They put it across very, very well. I mean, we didn't have to ask very many questions to them either. And it ran very well. And the thing that I loved about that STANIC exam was the encouragement that they gave you from you arrived until you left. Mm-hmm. It was really, really good. They settled you down almost immediately. And there was if there was somebody who was sort of lagging a wee bit, they took the time with them, and the carried through. But when it came to the actual examination, I mean, they didn't suffer fools very, very gladly, which I think is right. When it comes to doing an exam, I mean, there's no grey area. I mean, people say, "Oh, you don't fail." You either know it or you don't. As far as I'm concerned, and they were very, very good. They were very helpful, and it was well structured. And a lot of the stuff that I learned on that weekend, I applied to my activities further down the line.
I agree with you, but I like to hear you saying that, because the only qualification I ever went for was the STANIC, and I got it. And
yes, well,
yeah,
I mean,
and
if you never get another one, you're well enough qualified in my
yeah,
eyes.
well, might I add as well, Packy, I did very well in that one, and can I just say here, it's down to you
I
because
don't
yeah,
know. I don't know
very
about
much down
that.
to you because I remember beforehand, somebody saying, and of course, like at that age, like what was I? I was about, God, was I was just 30, early 30s, and I thought I knew everything because I was confident.
I know what
And
you mean. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and somebody said to me, "You'd want to get your casting looked at." I said, "My casting is perfect." And then I saw that the syllabus, and I went, And there's a few people around, and I can't remember who told me to go to you. And they said,
yeah.
"You want to get sorted out? You go
You must
up
have
to
been
Packy,
drunk.
go up to or well, well, I know I wasn't. Okay,
No, no, you turned up very sober, and
I
I
actually
can
was. It was before
I can
12.
remember it well. We were down at the back of the chapel stretch in
That's
the
right.
Welsh Bridge.
Yeah,
My, my
yeah.
my French clients who come regularly, they call it the cathedral beat.
Yes, it
Yeah,
sounds very
so
grand.
it does, and
A lovely stretch of
the
river. But no, I just say that you really helped me, and like I did very well in that course, and
yes,
no doubt it was down to you, and you really set me straight. And I came back here, and I remember you'd sort of told me just how to concentrate on to iron out my faults that I had at the time, and you gave me just a
yes,
couple of pointers, and I just
uh-huh,
worked on them. And then when I was
yeah,
being examined, I just put what you'd said to me in my head and
yes.
do what Packy told you, and flying colours.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah. Well, you hadn't much to. You hadn't much to. You were very, as I can recall, you were very good. From the
I was
start. So
keen.
you had no. You hadn't. I think that most people that are of a standard, to teach. Well, it's not all about casting. It's about being the ability to teach, to put forward your theories and your ideas. But the main thing with casting is when you get it right is about muscle memory. And people say to me, muscle memory. Yeah, I say, you should be able to talk to somebody and have a conversation and do, if you're a qualified instructor, and be able to do a perfect basic overhead cast without looking. The whole thing is, and the practice. Again, before
Yeah.
I went to do that, I bought all the Michael Evans tapes at the time, the big VHS tapes.
God, yeah,
And
yeah.
I used to practice every night. I used to go up to there was a little field beside the school. And I used to go up there from about maybe 7:30 to about 8:30, 9 o'clock. And whenever I came home, the first thing I did, the children were small then, and they were off to bed. And I sat down, stuck in the tape, and it got to a stage that I knew it. I knew Michael Evans's commentary off by heart, and some of the things that there's one of the things that I can remember was he talks about terminal velocity, and he picks these three stones, and he says, "Well, this massive big boulder." He says, "Well, you wouldn't if you wanted to throw a stone, you wouldn't lift this stone because it's much too heavy. You couldn't lift it." And then he points to this little small stone, and he says, "You wouldn't lift this little small stone because it's too small. You couldn't put the energy into it to carry it the distance that you want." He says, "You'd pick this one," and it was about the size of a lemon. He says, because he says you can apply the force, and it's all about terminal velocity. And he said, and I can remember, terminal velocity is the speed that an object of a given size and surface area can achieve when the effort put into it can no longer compete with the air friction in front. So I can still remember that.
But you know what? You just put it out there, but that makes so much sense then.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
terminal velocity to me, it never meant the same again. Once I knew what it was, and but when it was applied to something like casting, well, it made sense when you looked at it. But no, getting back to what you said about the Stanic. Now, I think that I learned something from every casting qualification, but I think that the foundation was set without a doubt after I took the the STANIC exam, which when I heard that it was being replaced by all this other,
level,
level 99, from one, it's it's just ridiculous. You can get I think you can get a level now as an assistant to the instructor.
Were you full-time guiding at that stage? Like, what made you want to go to that level?
Yeah.
Right. I'll tell you what happened. Unfortunately, through my the last 25, 30 years of my life, I've been dogged with health issues. And at that particular time, I was told by my doctor to get out, get plenty of exercise and get plenty of fresh air. So the obvious thing for me to do was to go to fish. So I spent a lot of time on the river. And when I say a lot of time, I almost got divorced all over it, but still with
you
me.
had your doctor's cert, so you could say, look, I have to.
Yes, that's right. I have it here. So
can you get a copy of that anywhere? Is that
so anyway, I was, when I went to the river, I not only decided that I wanted to catch fish, I decided I wanted to know more about the river and about what was below the surface of the river and between the two banks. So I would have spent a lot of time bent over lifting stones and looking at the agile darters and the stone clingers and looking at the crayfish and the stone loach and stuff like that. And but I also fished, and gradually I became quite good at catching trout, and word got out about it, and people started to contact me, and they'd say, "Oh, here you're good on the river. Any chance that you could take me out, for an hour or two?" And so then I started to do that, and then I used to get the phone calls, and people would ask, what qualification have you? Of course, I had no qualification, and so I decided I would inquire, and that was when I discovered the STANIC exam and APGAI. And so I thought to myself, and the reason that I went for the qualification was one phone call. This guy rang me up and he says, "You'll take me out to fish." I says, "Yeah, no problem." And he says, "How are you qualified?" And I says, I don't have a qualification." "What do you mean you don't have a qualification? You're taking people out to fish." I said, "That's correct." And he said to me, "Is there anybody in the area that has a qualification?" So I thought, well, that man's lost, because I don't have a qualification.
Yeah.
So he's lost to me as as a customer. So that's when I made my inquiries, and I took it from there. And to be quite honest, I mean, you do not need qualifications to be a good instructor. You do not need qualifications to be a good caster. Indeed, you don't need qualifications to be both. But it's surprising how many people will look to see if you've got a qualification, because that qualification means that you're good at what you do.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's not necessary.
But I suppose as well, Packy, with some people, it also shows, like particularly in your case, that you put the effort in. You've put the effort in. So somebody will feel more comfortable with you, going, well, this man has the qualifications, and now that a lot more people know about them, he's put the time into them. I think now as well, probably people are more aware of the likes of APGAI and the FFF, and it does of them. But I presume the time you're talking about back then, they weren't. I mean, I think for a long time there was only a handful of instructors between Ireland and England. And
well, in Northern Ireland, I only knew of at that time. I only knew of there was three. Pat Mulholland,
God rest him,
a man. God is right. A very good friend of mine.
Lovely man, Pat.
Before I went to do my exam, I went to Pat for him to take a look at me to see if I was up to the standard to go.
Yeah.
And we did it at Shaw's Bridge in Belfast. On the I can't remember. My head's going blank. I can't remember the Lagan. Is it
the Lagan?
And yeah.
Where's Shaw's Bridge?
Shaw's Bridge.
Is it in Belfast?
Yes, yeah. It's just on the outskirts of Belfast,
Yeah.
and I went there, and I got the bus up. I didn't have I was between cars. Pat picked me up at Great Victoria Station, and brought me out, and he looked at me, and he says, "Yeah, I think you've got a chance."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that was it. And from that, me and Pat, we had a. He used to complain because whenever I'd ring him up, his wife would answer the phone, and I spent more time talking to his wife than I did to him. So, but no, that was basically how it started. And the reason why I decided to go for the qualification. And then, of course, when I got past the STANIC exam, Michael Evans was one of the examiners, and I said to him, I says, "Mr. Evans," and he went, "It's not Mr. Evans, it's Michael." And so I said, "Well, Michael, what do you think my chances are of taking the APGAI exam?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "You're of a standard." He says, "To do it." But he says, things have changed, he says, in the last few years. So if there's anybody in Northern Ireland or the south of Ireland that you know that has passed APGAI recently, um, pay them a little visit and get them to take a look at you. So when I got home, I inquired, and there was a chap called David Dowry from Ballyhinch, an excellent caster and an excellent fly tire. I made contact with him through Pat. Pat knew him, and I went up, and I can remember out on his little green at the back of the house. I did the casts, and Davey would take a look at me, and he'd look, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And that's the way it went. So it didn't last very long.
That was it. So you were good for the APGAI then. And then where did you sit? Where did you do the APGAI?
We had to go to Stony Horse College in Lancashire.
Right.
It's a Jesuit school, and it has big pools running up the avenue to it, and it was full of rainbow trout the length of your arm. So
nice.
you could watch them. You could watch them going up and down through, But I went there and did it there. And that would have been with roughly about 10 months after I got my STANIC.
Right.
And
so you didn't rest on your laurels long, really, after getting the STANIC.
No,
yeah.
No, I didn't. I went on ahead and got that, and then I started becoming busy, at the guiding and the teaching, and it was about, I think it was 04 before I went to, that would have been 95, 96 year STANIC APGAI, and then it was 04 before I went to America to do my FFF.
Packy, just like reading through your bio, like in terms of what you've done, it really strikes me, and I'll just give it kind of a quick potted kind of overview of it. Like, you did guiding, you were game angling instructor, casting demonstrator, you worked for the Locks Agency, you ran the summer school, resident guide instructor at Loch Earn Resort, you gave talks and tuition to angling clubs. It just really strikes me as you're somebody who was always looking to kind of give back and teach. And, it wasn't just a private personal thing that you wanted to go out fishing and catch your fish. You really wanted to kind of share your knowledge.
You've hit the nail on the head. It was something that I enjoyed. As you might have guessed by now, my mother was quite correct whenever she said, when I was a young boy, he'll never be stuck for a word. And so I enjoy the talking aspect. I enjoyed the banter, and if you could get a discussion going, that was even better. I mean, it's better than standing there just talking to people sitting looking at you. If you get a little I enjoyed sharing the, not just the knowledge, sharing the experience. For me, that was a big thing. I was never into self-promotion, I was never into, making sure that I was seen here, making sure I was seen there. I was very comfortable sitting in a wee hut talking to four people, about fishing up an upstream nymph or the different slack line techniques when casting to trout,
Was the greatest pleasure for you, though, Packy, is it seeing a beginner taken on board, or so anybody taking on board the information and it coming to fruition.
I loved having somebody who'd never seen a fly rod. I loved taking them out, because you had to coin a phrase, you had a blank canvas, and at the end of the day, the picture that appeared in that canvas was down to what you did and how you applied yourself with this individual. And for me, the picture was this wee face looking back at you holding the trout.
Yeah.
And it might have been only 6 inches, 9 inches long, but it was a monster to them, And whenever you take them from explaining to them how to put a rod together and make sure you don't miss an eye when you're threading the fly line through, to them actually casting to hooking, playing and landing their fish. That for me really was what and still is all about, although I don't do it now, but my mind set hasn't changed. I still can still from talking about it, sort of experience the pleasure that I used to get, with seeing that happening, and it's amazing. The person to teach, I don't know, well, you probably know, Doc, yourself, the person to teach and the person you will have the most results with usually is the person who has never had a rod in their hand. Because a lot of people that come to you that have been fishing for whatever length of time, they have these habits and preconceived ideas, and it's hard, very hard sometimes to get them to change, and adapt to what you're trying to, put to them, And as I said, the longest distance in fishing is from the head to the hand. Getting that, getting that through.
It's not the other side of the bank. No, you're right.
No,
it's not the other side of the bank.
Tell us this, Packy. You've probably maybe answered that. Like I was going to say, what's the biggest difficulty you've seen with, say, people who are coming to learn? Is it people who aren't open-minded enough to accept what's being said?
The thing that I was most apprehensive or wary about was the guy turning up in the Sims jacket, new Hardy rod, and the price list still hanging from the coat, and he's as a guy told me this one time. He says, "Beware of the pale face coming to you." He says, because he's spent his lifetime in an office and he's suddenly taken a notion of what the fish,
Yeah.
So you get the guy, all the gear and no idea, that sort of thing, and that usually was a challenge. But, usually, when you see somebody coming, whether it be teaching or guiding, if you know your job, within 5 to 10 minutes, you're going to have a good idea of what way it's going to pan out, for that session. Sometimes it can be a long day.
Definitely there. Now, you probably wouldn't have got a teaching, and I don't do much teaching at all now, but I do guiding, and I know you're saying about the pale face coming, but even sometimes with, should we say, guy with all the new gear, it's the guy or girl who turns around, but generally if it turns around and say to you, please tell me if I'm doing anything wrong. Once you hear that, you're thinking, well, we can do something here,
Yeah, that's correct. And the guy that comes to you and he says, look, I've been fishing 25 years, but I just cannot get that little bit of distance. What am I doing wrong? They mightn't necessarily be doing anything wrong. It might be just a wee tweak to their technique, And the thing that about teaching is you should always look for the positives in the the way that that your pupil is learning. Once you use a negative, that negates anything positive that's gone before. For example,
really
if
true.
they do it, if they do a good cast and you say to them, no, or sorry, a bad cast, and you say, no, that's not right. They sort of recoil back a wee bit, But if you say to them, no, that was very good. Now let's see how we can make it better. And it encourages them to bring it that wee bit on.
What about instructors that have come to you? Is it the same thing in terms of instructors that think they know it all, or or people looking to get the qualification? What's the biggest obstacle you found with them?
The biggest obstacle is bad habits.
Okay.
And it's not, most of the guys that came to me, I'd say practically all of them, didn't come with the attitude, there's not really that much wrong, I don't need that. They all came because they had a problem with the cast. I mean, I knew a guy, and he actually went on and he did his FFF. He couldn't do a wiggle cast. He just couldn't get it. I mean, a wiggle cast is you make your rod flex from the tip. You don't make it oscillate, and he was making it oscillate instead of
from the tip.
From the tip down. And the way to do it is you basically tell them, right, hold the rod, minimal movement of the arm and wrist for maximum movement at the tip. So you get them starting and you just get them moving the tip. Then you tell them to more force without, and once they get the hang of that, it's up. But if you're not told that, it can be difficult to work it out for yourself. But no, most of the guys that would come to me, it would be because of techniques that they've learned that they just had developed a bad habit, or indeed they've been taught wrong. They've been told the wrong way to do it. And I mean, one guy came to me, and I'm sure you're familiar with the technique. You cast with the book under your arm, and this. And he came to me with this, idea, and I told him, well, no. And then he said to me, well, that's the way that I've been taught by such and such. But
if you drop the book, you're casting wrong.
That's right. That's
Although
right.
That's interesting, because you say about faults, and sorry for coming in, but I remember my fault, which you picked up on. I needed the book almost because my elbow was all over the place, Packy. And I remember you telling me, and I remember, and it came back to me, and I remember 2 years beforehand, I've been out fishing, and a guy in a boat behind me had seen me, and he going, "You're throwing a lovely line, but your elbow's a bit all over the place." Right?
Yes.
And I'll never forget, but take a great umbrage with this. Right?
Yes.
I was throwing a great. What are you telling me about it? Jack Mooney, God rest him. Jack was a great river fisherman down in, he used to fish the Meg, and he was a good caster. And I knew him when he was saying it to me. And it was only, I felt after it was been with you, that I had to go back to him straight away and go, "Jack, you were right. I'm sorry."
But most of the guys that came with aspirations to maybe a more advanced qualification than they have, or maybe they didn't have a qualification, in my experience, the main thing to put right was a bad habit. And maybe they were casting out of plane on the lateral, direction, or So usually, people who got to that stage, it was more a bit of tweaking that was needed than actually, actually
fundamentals.
Yes, that's right.
So just on that, Packy, do you think, as anglers, we're guilty, and I'd say I'm guilty of this, is that you kind of get a couple of lessons and you learn how to cast, and it's grand and it's enough and it's getting you out into the water and you're catching fish, but you're probably not as casting as well as you could be, or as efficiently, or being able to get a better line out. That we're guilty of just kind of, actually, we're getting it out anyway, it's grand, as opposed to going back and trying to kind of improve.
An old angler, when I say old, he was really old, that I met down in Sligo. And this was before I actually accomplished any qualification. And we were chatting about casting, and I was watching him cast, and he was a beautiful caster. There was nothing rushed. His technique was nice. It wasn't hurried. His stops were perfect in the right places and for the correct length of time for the length of line that he was aerialising. And I was watching him and I thought to myself, I'm going to have go over and have a wee chat with this man. So I went over to him and chatted away. We talked a bit about the thing, and like me, he had never received a lesson. And but he said a thing to me that I never forgot. But it took me several years to realise what he actually meant. And that was what he said to me. He says, you know, son, he says, if the rod doesn't talk to you, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
And I wondered, now, what the hell does he mean by the rod talking to you? And basically, if you don't feel what the rod is doing, feel where the load is, feel where it's, straightening, feel when the power is being applied. Basically, you have to understand what's happening. And if you hold the rod correctly, most people hold the rod too tight, and they don't feel anything. But if you hold the rod nice and again, there was a German book that it was written by a German angler, and he said, when you're casting, he says, you should imagine that you're holding a freshly hatched out chick in your hand. He says, you don't want to hold it too securely that you're going to damage it, but you don't want to let it escape. He said, that's the way you hold the rod.
Packy, tell us just what do you think has been the biggest development in terms of tackle? And do you think it's made things easier for new beginners starting fly fishing casting?
Well, obviously, it's going from cane rods through to solid fiberglass, then hollow fiberglass, then your carbon, then your graphite, and now there's this new, I can't remember what's it called, the new stuff. Well, you see, they've made a lot of developments, not only in the materials, but in the resins that they use. You know, the resin, believe it or not, in fiberglass in the early days, that was most of the weight of the rod was the resin. So now they've developed these resins now that they have to use so little of them to to get the desired effect. The thing about the lightness of a rod and the actions that they can get into rods, that for me is the biggest development. Obviously, fly lines too. Fly lines, but again, I use 3 fly lines, or 3 different kinds of fly lines. I use a weight forward, I use a double taper, and I use a sink tip. That's it.
Right.
But you see, well, that probably being on the river and hillocks, and I'm fishing from the shore. I don't need any of the the compound tapers and all this stuff. Now, and you have to remember, a lot of what's manufactured today is not designed to catch fish. It's designed to catch you in the pocket. Peter Anderson, you've heard of Peter Anderson, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Peter Anderson once told me that he used to go, he was sponsored by Daiwa for years. And he used to go and spend a full weekend at their factory in Scotland. And he would go through all the blanks and he would try them out. Until he got 3 rods that would do him the year. Now, he told me, he says, it doesn't matter about the weight of the rod or the thickness of the rod. It's what the rod can do when it's in your hand. Yeah. He said, that's the important thing. He says, obviously, he says, a big, thick rod will be more wind resistant, and you'll probably, and if it's heavy, you're going to tire out quicker. He says, but he says, you have to, he says, sort of strike a deal between the length of time you're fishing and what the rod's doing for you. Now, he said, that's what he said to me. He says, it's what the rod is doing for you. He says, regardless of the weight, or he says the thickness or the material. He says, if it's working for you, then that's the rod. Now, I for the last 12 years, I just packed it in there last year. I built rods and I refurbished rods for people. And there's a very big interest in lightweight glass fiber rods, especially for river fishing.
Smaller brooks and smaller rivers.
I could build a rod, fiberglass rod, ready for action in a rod tribunal for under £200. Now, and I was making a profit, at that price. You see that there's rods on the markets costing £700, £800, £900, glass fibre rods. And they talk about, this rod has got unidirectional fibres, it's this, is that. Most fiberglass rods are unidirectional fibres because that's the nature of the beast, And the wee rod that I built and sold for well under £200 was probably no different in what it could do and the value for, there was a big difference in the value for money. But put them together, blindfold the guy and get him to go out and cast with it. Most of them couldn't tell you the difference. And for me, that was one of the big differences, in the rod. I made a lot of those rods as a guy in the Gaeltacht area in Donegal, Donegal Boyle. I don't know if you know of him, but he has got 4 of them, and he has an 8.5 or a 5 that he uses to fish for salmon, and he has caught salmon to 6.5 pound on it. So, and he swears by them.
Wow.
So, definitely, I would say go to a place that's going to let you use the rod, let you cast with the rod, and let you feel what the rod's doing. And you do not need to be spending a fortune or looking for a mortgage to buy equipment, I mean, when you think about it, there was I was telling you about these guys torn up in all the gear. I mean, one guy turned up to me one day, and we were just talking about the gear because he was all Sims. He had Sims this, Sims vest, Sims wading jacket, Sims waders, everything. Everything he had before he even lifted the rod cost over £2,000. The trout really doesn't care whether you turn up in that or if you turn up naked, So, and I would tell people not to go overboard, with the.
And you'd argue probably you'd be better off spending the money on lessons with a cheaper rod because you'll be able to do more.
I quite agree.
Yeah, definitely.
You'd be far safer going and spending but go to the right person, the person that's going to deliver what you want.
Yeah.
Now, I know instructors. They would fish mainly lakes, and now if you want to fish from a boat, they're the guy to go to be taught. But if he spends the majority of his time in the boat, he mightn't be the best man to go to if you wanted to fish a small stream like the Tempo River beside me, where a 9-foot rod can reach across most of it.
Yeah.
So you're quite right. Spend your money. Look at what fishing that you're going to be doing. Look at what's available in the market. I always say, if you're middle range, you'll not go too far wrong. Don't go for the deers. Don't go for the cheapest. Middle range. If you're buying a rod now anywhere from £100 to £300, you're not going to buy a bad rod.
No, I agree with you totally there, Packy. There aren't many bad rods out there, and once you go mid-range, they're absolutely excellent. If you have the misfortune of picking up one of the deer ones and liking it, well, that's
that's it.
But if it's like what you say, Packy. I remember once picking up a rod. It was one of the first shops I ever got a chance to pick up a rod to try it, and it was in the shop in Rutland where you were able to go out and try it. And I remember there was a Shakespeare XPS 10-foot for 7. Retailing at the time at 79 sterling, and I just picked it up and I absolutely adored it. I thought this was, and I went for it. I also have had the misfortune of picking up very expensive rods as well and liking them.
Yes,
well. So it can work both ways. But it's true, and what Peter Anderson said and what you're saying to there, we're all different, and something just suits you. So, it's like
if it feels good to you,
it's perfectly.
One of the best light line rods for rivers and say it's small headlocks. The Gray's Lance series. They're about £175. And to be quite honest, if put one of the I'm not going to mention names. I don't want them litigating me. But if you put it against some of these rods cost £400-500,
Yep.
It's every bit as good. It's every bit as good. Nice action. They're light. And as a matter of fact, the rod that I use mostly now is the Gray's Lance, 8 foot for a 4-weight.
That's one now to look out for. Packy, tell us this, just in terms of the fishing itself, you describe yourself as old school. You're not a fan of the lob or nymphing?
No. I love nymphing if it's upstream, single nymph with a floating line and a long leader. Yeah, no problem with that. It's these guys that go out with a mini pike bung float tied, and you can see it from 50 yards. I mean, I've watched it, I've seen it, and they have a weighted fly on the end and a little dropper about 10 inches up, and there's no casting involved because the leader's 35 foot long. And you can't see their fly line; it's still all sitting on the reel. The rod's 11 foot long, and it's supposed to be for a 2-weight, and they use the weight of the fly, the point fly, to flick it out. A caster...
dubious, I hear you say. Dubious.
Yeah. There's a guy that I know, he calls them the non-casting club. And the other thing about it is too, there's no, I'm sorry, but in my opinion, no skill involved, because if it stops at all, they strike. They don't know if it's a fish. Do you know what I mean? They don't know if it's a fish. If they pop it in and they're bringing it around and stops, they strike.
Yeah.
Or if their little float, indicator, if it stops, they strike.
Yeah.
No,
I'll tell you what, no, Pat, you can get off the fence now and tell us, what do you really think?
I'm too long in the denture now to change my ways.
No, and rightly so. You're rightly so.
I love the dry fly fishing for me. I love the dry fly fishing, but people are surprised. They ask me, what is the most difficult form of fishing? And when I don't say dry fly, and I don't say nymph, the most difficult is fishing the and nymph comes into it, but fishing wet flies when nothing's rising.
Yeah. Because
you don't know where the fish are, you don't know what they're taking, and you don't know if there's any fish there at all. And you have to have, if you have confidence in the flies that you're taking, and you know how to get them down to the fish, and you can work them through a pool or a run, then you will get fish. And
the important thing you said there is working them. You see, there's two, and we've had this before. And we on was it when we were talking about the function? Is it
yes?
Oh yeah.
We're talking Dave Donovan.
Yes.
And he was talking about wet fly. I was very interested. It was great to hear him. And he was going, it is a very skillful method.
Yes.
And some people fish wet flies and they just chuck it across and let it down with the flow. And they'll catch a couple of fish. And then other guys fish it and they work it down. They know, they hold it back till the flies have achieved it, and then they let it go. And then they swing it around with the flies at the right depth. And funny enough, they catch more fish.
There was a guy when I was before I even started to fly fish. I used to watch him on the river, because whenever I was in my early teens, if you seen a guy fly fishing on the river, you got out. He was the man. I mean, you almost bowed to him, and you got out of the river. But I used to watch this guy, and he used to, every now and then he'd stop and he'd have a cigarette, and when he's smoking, that was my opportunity to get over to talk to him. And he was saying about fishing. I asked him, "What? You've 3 flies on there?" He says, "Yeah, I've 3 flies on." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "They're called wet flies." He says, "Because they sink down in the water." And I says, "Well, how do you judge how far they sink?" I mean, I was only about 13 or 14 at the time. And he looked at me and he says, "If you watch," he says, "when I'm fishing," he says, "if I'm fishing a fast run," he says, "I don't cast across at an angle of 45. He says, "I don't even cast 90 degrees. He says, "I cast 45 degrees upstream. Keep mending the line." He says, "And by the time the flies have come and the leaders come to where I would normally cast," he says, "the flies are well sunk, and then they start to come back up." And he says that induces a take. And he was right, because I tried it and it worked. It worked. So, as you say, working the flies, knowing your flows, as the Americans say, get used to the different velocities, get used to the different runs. And people, in my opinion, they don't observe. They don't. I mean, they don't use their eyes. I mean, if you watch and you take a look, you will see what's happening. If you watch a run, and I've done this, especially during the late evening rise, which is my favourite time to be on the river, because nobody else is on it. And I'd watch a run, and if you watch a run has a certain pattern. It has a certain pattern. If you see a deviation in that pattern, that's normally a fish there. And people don't look, they don't, 99 times out of 100 would walk by that thinking, oh, there's no fish there. But they didn't take the time to stop and look. And that's the difference between a successful fisherman and a fisherman.
And a caster.
Observation. Well, being able to cast to and put the fly to the area you want in the manner you want, that has a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah, exactly. Packy, I don't know if we'd asked you in advance, Tom, just about the most memorable fish. Do you have it? Because what we ask everybody, Packy, anyway, is for the most memorable fish on the fly. So I don't know, are we putting you on the spot here, or do you have one?
No. Two fish. I'll be very brief. Was one fish at the back of the village of where I live, Maguire's Bridge, and it was over an area called the Scar. It was a very high bank, and it was lots of shrubs and trees and bushes. And there was a fish rising about a foot out from the bank on the far side, and and he was rising pretty constantly. So I thought, right, I'll try for it, and there was black knot on the water, a little small black knot. So I had a size 16 parachute black knot tied by Frankie McPhillips. And so I had lots of confidence in it. And I cast the fish and it ignored it. And I thought, right, must have been a bit of drag. So I cast again and it ignored it. And I thought, no, there's something funny here. So I sat down and I watched. And I noticed that where I watched the flies come down, there was lots of black knot. And the fish was taking the black knot that was between it and the bank. So I thought, right, there's something funny here. So I cast it as near to the bank as I could. And it came up and took it first time. And when I got it in, it was a nice fish. It was a fish of about 3/4 of a pound. And when I got it in, the eye that was facing me was gone. It was one eye, and it was taking the flies that was drifting down between its station and the bank. I remember, and I never forget that trout. The other one was, I was fishing a little hill loch, and there was a fish. It was rising out, and I'm not normally. I always tell people most fish are caught within 8 to 14 meters from you. But anyway, this fish was quite a bit out, and I was fishing midge pupa, and I had a red midge pupa on, and this fish would have been about, I'd say, the guts of 28, 30 yards from me. And I thought, right, I'll watch it, and I'd watched it for a few minutes, and I seen its pattern, of its little run that it was doing. So I waited and I counted the rises, and I got the fly out about 2 stations before it was due to go to the fly, and the fly landed. And I just hardly moved it because it was a midge pupa. A midge pupa doesn't fly through the water. So I just give it a small tuck, and next thing, bang, he took it. And it was a fish it was a lovely trout. It wasn't particularly big. It's about a pound and a quarter. Yeah. But it was the distance involved and the way that I had to count the rises. And make sure that it was
there. On a full line, to hook him on a full line as well is always hard.
On a full line.
Yeah.
And that's the only time I brag about casting distance.
yeah. Well, it can work every now and again. Every now and again. Excellent. And by the way, I know The first fish, your first most memorable fish, I know what his second name was, second as myself. He was Sullivan.
Yes,
Sullivan.
that's correct.
One eye.
Yeah. But the first fish I ever caught was a meal.
Yeah.
I caught
Not
it in
on
the
the
drain.
fly. What were we on the worm?
On the garden olive.
Yeah.
The worm.
Never forsake it.
Yeah, the garden olive.
And you won't forget that fish either, will you?
No, 6 years old.
Oh God.
And I thought I caught a snake, and I ran up to, the back door of where I lived was only 70 meters from the river. And so I had a hazel stick with brown line and a little bit of gut tied on, and a black penny hook, hook, and caught it anyway. And I pulled it up, and when I seen it, I screamed my head off. But I ran up to the house, but I dragged it behind me. I didn't let it go. And our neighbour came out, and he took it off, and old Willie Kettles, and he actually showed me how to skin it.
Yeah.
And he then dried the skin of the eel, and he says that'll come in handy. He says it's a good cure for rheumatism.
I thought you were going to use it on a fly, actually.
No. He used it, and he did. He actually dried it, and he used it on his wrist. He wrapped it on his wrist. And by the way, he ate the eel as well. He didn't give it back to us.
Oh God, Packy, we could stay talking to you all night, but listen, before I let you go, you were telling us there you've a book in the pipeline.
I have. I'm doing a little book. It's some of my angling adventures and some of the people that I met, and I've met some characters, I can tell you. It's about that, and it's about also about growing up in a little rural village in County Fermanagh during the 60s, and the things we used to get up to and the things we got away with. And basically about, I used to watch my father in the garden, and he used to complain. I come from a big family. There was 8 boys and 2 girls. And he used to complain, look at the size of the family I reared. Not one of them would help me in the garden. But if we went to help him, he used to chase us, go, leave that alone, and things like that. And running around Wyers Bridge and fishing in the river as a youngster. And some of the stories, they're mainly to do with fishing. So they are, and it's going to be about 25 short stories, all ranging from about 500 words to 3,000 or 4,000 words per story.
Lovely. Great. Look forward to that, Packy.
Yeah, of a lot of time, I suppose, isn't it? Like a more innocent time, shall we say?
Yeah, well, it definitely was.
There was definitely no bongs then.
No. And the plums from the Priest Orchard tasted much better then than they do now.
Packy, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. And look, we might follow up then when the book is out, and we can chat some more again. I'd say we're only scratching the surface of what you could tell us. I was very nervous about doing this, but I've really enjoyed it. Jesus, it was hard to get a word out of you now, Packy. So,
your mother was right.
Loosen up the next time. Packy Trotter, thanks a million for joining us.
No problem, boys. All the best.
Don't forget to rate, review and follow the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. Plus you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com as well as on Instagram, and myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.